It's an honor to be at Good Shepherd. It's a great honor to preach here. I would say again, the hardest thing about preaching, people may say otherwise, but for me, the hardest thing about preaching is dealing with the pulpits. They all change, This is not the pulpit that used to be here, and probably a good thing that has changed. And the last one, where I was a pastor in Madison, Wisconsin, the pulpit was big and enormous, and it hid how nervous I was, you see, and made me feel secure. And this one kind of is a revealing pulpit, and so I'm feeling totally without protection, which is a good thing, I should think. But it's an honor to be here. I'm going to thank Pastor Carol for the invitation to come and to preach here. I'm thankful that Father Jaime Case is here also, and especially grateful for this morning's forum. For those of us who are here, we've learned that, each of these traditions, Lutheran and Episcopal, each of these traditions has elements to which we cling, many of them sort of unnecessarily. And those to which we cling necessarily are the ones that, make our traditions really very, I wouldn't say identical, because that would be less interesting, wouldn't it? But certainly conventional. We come together in them. So if you're nervous about going over to St. John, San Juan, I would say be nervous about one thing only. Don't be concerned about, what they do at St. John, San Juan. It's what the building will do should we have an earthquake while you're in it. That's a concern. But not one that will be long-lived. Because should it come down while you're there, while we're there, all worries are over. Not a problem, really. Not a problem at all. So far as I can see, at least. Brother Jaime may disagree. I don't know. But Marcia and I, when we sit down at St. John San Juan, try to be sure we're not under one of those big beams, But it's an honor to be here. 42 years ago, this very parish, in this very room, welcomed Marcia, me, and our children when we had just returned from graduate studies and were living on borrowed money. So the $1,932 a month we received at that point came in very handy. It was wonderful. And then 6 years after we moved away from Good Shepherd and Olympia, Good Shepherd sent gifts, amazing gifts, to the church in Silverton, Oregon, where we were serving, where I was a pastor, when it had been arsoned and burned to the ground. And a delegation from this congregation was sent, bearing, like the wise people of old, bearing gifts, treasures. And it was a great thing, a wonderful thing. So Good Shepherd's gifts of hospitality, outreach, and service inspire us and the whole church to this day. But now I'm also here to preach, in a sense, in support of cooperation between churches in general, and between the Episcopal Church and the Lutheran ELCA Church in particular, and even more particularly between these two congregations, St. John San Juan and Good Shepherd Lutheran Church. But when our youngest son, John, who was baptized in this room, I would say at that font, but it was a different font, baptized in this room in February of 1984, when our first son, Andrew, second child, but first son, over in that pew, out of pique for him not being baptized that day, ripped up John's baptismal certificate. Just to show us that, in fact, sin lives in children. If we didn't know that already, we certainly learned it. But in any case, so John and his wife, Delara, and their child, Owen, announced to us in November of 2018 that we're picking up and moving, they said, to Olympia, Washington. And, we'd be happy if you would come along. We jumped at the chance to return to Olympia. But, as you know now, we have not, rejoined Good Shepherd. You might say, why? Why is that? Well, I think it's important. As a sign of ecumenical promise, we worship at St. John, San Juan Episcopal Church, as we had also in retirement worshiped at Grace Episcopal Church following retirement in Madison. Grace was just 2 blocks up the street. People, Lutherans, would say, so where are you going to the Episcopal Church? In Madison, they buy this. I would say, it's an environmental reason. We don't have to drive our car. Oh, okay. So that's why we go to St. John. It's closer than Gloria Dei, and or whatever. But nonetheless, so we came back here, and we came as associate members. We still have some Lutheran connections to associate members of Lutheran Memorial Church in Madison, and so Bishop Jake welcomed us as sort of Luthkapalians or whatever, because we have connections with both traditions, which, I'm sorry to disappoint you, is the same tradition. It's just the same tradition lived out in some different ways, but none of which are more, I think, striking and difficult. Jaime, I was going to say this morning at the class, what's that which really stands out in the liturgy that's so different? Birthdays and anniversaries. Every Sunday. Anybody celebrating a birthday, anybody celebrating an anniversary, come up. It's a clever way of raising a little money. Then you have a box there. You put a little money in, and that's it, really, I would say. Pretty much. That's the big difference. So, children are the same, both places, I would say. But I think today our church traditions are being drawn together all across the, I would say, spectrum of church life, not so much out of strength, but I think out of weakness, out of God-given weakness. I used to say to my bishop in the Oregon Synod of the ELCA when I was the ecumenical representative for that synod, and I'd go to these meetings, and the bishop would say to me, so what are these other traditions offering? They offer the same thing we are, weakness. That's where the will to cooperation can, in a sense, come motivationally at least. Yeah, shared weakness. And after all, what does St. Paul teach us? That the crucified Christ is the sign of God's strength. The sign of God's strength. Well, anyway, this brings us then to Isaiah 62 and John 2, these 2 readings from which the sermon derives. You may not believe it, but that's the truth. And in both of these readings, marriage is a kind of window into God's faithfulness. So the Lord uses marriage in 2 surprising ways in these passages. Forsaken Judah, that is that part of ancient Israel, Judah, I guess, a different part of that holy land, Judah, the southern part. Judah is here addressed as God's delightful bride, when in fact, not in faith, but in fact, Judah was forsaken, miserable. And then at Cana, itself a forsaken, miserable kind of place. No one can even decide where ancient Cana really was. There's a big dispute about that. Perhaps it's a bit north of Nazareth, up on the edge of the hill country of Galilee, but no one's really sure. But there, Jesus is revealed as the figurative bridegroom at this marriage feast in Canaan, the place that had no Fanta, in case you're wondering. So here we have these readings that describe Judah just having returned from exile in Babylon as a forsaken people, a destroyed land. Think of the Middle East today, much of it destroyed, forsaken. Gaza, Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, Iran, Israel, all the rest. Think of Ukraine, think of Russia. Think of so many places around the world where we feel forsaken, abandoned, lost. Then hear Isaiah. You, addressing Judah, you shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate. But you, the desolate one, the forsaken one, you shall be called, my delight is in her. And your land, your desolate land, shall be called married. For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. We might ask ourselves, who really seeks a forsaken partner? Like Pastor Carol, like Father Jaime, like most clergy types. We've been to lots of weddings. I don't think I've ever heard a couple sit down and say, well, I chose her, or I chose him because they were so forsaken, Yeah, they were just desolate. Had anybody ever said that to me? And I said, well, that's how I feel right now. So, it's the case, I think, that the Lord is bizarre here at this point. The Lord seeks the least, the little, the last, the lost, and the dead as a marriage partner. It's bizarre. So now a little story about the past. Old guys always have stories about the past, that's all. Years ago, when we were visiting friends in the northeast of England, near Durham, England, we were invited to accompany them to the 25th anniversary of a construction business owned by some family friends of theirs. So we thought about it and said, well, that would be kind of fun. We've never been to a, 25th business sort of anniversary out in the English countryside. Sure, we'll go. But the event was way out in the country. It was an enormous kind of barn affair, and hundreds of people had assembled in a huge warehouse, and a rock band was playing, and wine and ale flowed. A mixed grill, the English love mixed grill because they're so hungry for meat, and barbecued meats, sausages, and strips of beef, and some pork, and bacon, all kinds of meat, more meat than any carnivore could consume. And so when we got our plates full, we sat down at trestle tables, and we began to kind of visit with these people we didn't know. We only knew Steve and Leslie, and there were hundreds of other people, and so. But it was even with the ale and the wine, which was flowing in abundance, conversation was going slowly. It was kind of tough. At length, the band stopped playing, and a child in the family, older than this one, but not by a lot, a child, a boy, stood up. He went to the stage, and a band member gave him the mic, and he thanked everyone for coming. And so there was polite applause at that. And then he paused, and he said, well, to tell you the truth, the real reason why we're here today is that yesterday, Mom and Dad got married. And there was this pause, of silence. Hundreds of people just stopped. And then, when, it had sunk in that Barb and Charlie, who'd been together for 25 years, had 4 kids, and everybody thought, well, they're married, But now, after 25 years, they got married. That is, they promised faithfulness unto death. The place just erupted. People went wild. Strangers embracing each other, English people embracing each other, and dancing together and shouting for joy. It was the most astonishing business celebration I'd ever been to. And the place had just gone wild. It was amazing. It was like Cana, I would imagine, all over again. When the wine gave out and the blessed mother of Jesus told the servants, do whatever he tells you. So Jesus told them, and the servants obeyed. They filled the 6 stone jars of water with water. That would compute to something like maybe 120 gallons of wine. The steward said it was the best wine. And suddenly a normal penny-pinching wedding, where people are saving money so they can take a honeymoon to Barbados or somewhere. So you're all drinking Gallo by the little tin cup there, Suddenly this ordinary wedding event had turned into the best party anybody could ever remember. And Cana, this broken down place, was transformed. The mundane became eternal. After all, according to John, the evangelist, it happened on the third day. That is, in ancient Christian tradition, everybody recognizes the third day as the day of resurrection, joy unbound. So we are still talking about Cana to this day, 2 millennia later, the time Jesus and his mother went to a dry wedding and it suddenly overflowed with abundant joy. A ho-hum company party became the marriage feast of the Lamb. In the ancient Jewish tradition, or at least some of them, the bridegroom provides the wine for the wedding feast, drinks the Kiddush cup, the first cup. Christ is then here the figurative bridegroom who provides the best wine more than anyone could ever want or need. Christ reveals himself as the bridegroom who pledges faithfulness unto death, like Barb and Charlie. Who would have thought it? John's first and last signs. That's what it's like when churches cooperate. Think about this, what will people say when Good Shepherd Lutheran people and St. John San Juan people share things together? It almost sounds like faith. It almost sounds like belief. It almost sounds like trust. It almost sounds like cooperation, which it would be. It would not be business as usual, that's for sure. But it would be more than a marriage feast. It would be the marriage feast. It would be Christ the bridegroom with the forsaken, beloved bride. Just when we're lost and forsaken, just when the wine gives out, just when the Spirit then stirs, good things happen. And suddenly we are loved, and we love, and we share, and we cooperate. When no one would have us, we see that we belong to the bridegroom. We see that the bridegroom loves. And the Lord rejoices over us and over all as a bridegroom rejoices over the bride. When churches cooperate, then it's the feast of the Lamb. So then, as Mother Mary said, it's not complicated. Do whatever he tells you. Do whatever he tells you. Why? Because he is faithful even unto death and resurrection, for us and for all. Thanks be to God.